Today we're going to show you how to make food-grade gang molds for casting of lollipops and other candy-related items using the SORTA-Clear 18 food-grade silicone. Now let's just jump into the project and see how we do this.
The Lollipop model is going to be this stainless steel ball bearing that we purchased. These are brand new and clean, and we're going to use them for the shape of the lollipop. The reason why I chose these ball bearings is because they're already polished, and that high gloss is going to translate into our mold, which later on is going to translate into our castings. That means every casting coming out of that mold is going to have a high polish and clean look to them. And we're also going to use these bottle caps to help us set up those ball bearings. These bottle caps are going to be adhered to a working surface. And notice that the working surface has a grid, so we're trying to be as precise as possible when making gang molds. It makes it a lot easier in the production. Take a look at these little cones. They're perfectly shaped, so once we have them molded, they're going to be a perfect funnel for the actual candy we're going to be pouring into the mold. Now, the ball bearings are simply adhered to those using some hot melt glue. And then we're going to construct the mold box around the model itself. Here I'm using some plexiglass simply for the reason that is see-through and you guys be able to watch and see into the mold as I'm constructing this and pouring the silicone. I'm just going to go around the perimeter. Because we're working with food-grade materials and plan to cast food items into these molds, we're not using a release agent, but the silicone will not stick to any of these surfaces. Now that our mold box is ready, we can go ahead and mix up some silicone. This is the SORTA-Clear 18. It is a 100:10 mix ratio by weight, so we do need to use an accurate gram scale. But what's more important is that the SORTA-Clear 18, 37, and 40 are food-grade silicone, so we can cast a variety of food-related items into these silicones. Now, it is recommended that you vacuum degas the material before pouring into the mold. If you're not sure about how to process any of these materials, do take a look at your technical bullet and you'll find a lot of information there. We can go ahead and simply dispense the part A and part B. Again, you want to use an accurate gram scale for this, and then mix it thoroughly by scraping the sides and scraping the bottom of your mixing container. You're going to hear that a lot from me. Scrape the sides, scrape the bottom of your mixing container. Be absolutely sure that you're doing a good job on mixing the two components. Now, the silicone is exposed to a vacuum chamber. And if you're not familiar with the vacuum chamber practices, click on the link above and that's going to take you to some videos for some more information. Now the silicone is poured from up high into our mold box and it's allowed to seek its own level. So it's pushing away any kind of air bubbles away from our model. This silicone pour technique is called needling, and it allows any remaining air bubble in the silicone to break as they're poured over the edge and stretched out in the thin stream. Silicone is now allowed a full cure for 24 hours before demolding. One thing I like to do is leave the mixing container nearby, and that's a good indicator if your mold is fully cured. So if the material in your mixing container set up, you're good to go on the actual mold itself. And here we're going to take apart the mold box, and then we can start to demold the actual model. Now, because the opening to the mold itself, to the object, is too small to squeeze those ball bearings out, we're going to have to cut that mold partially. And I'm going to use a razor knife to simply cut on both sides of that stainless steel ball bearing. I'm going to cut down halfway. And notice that I'm cutting in a jagged motion. That's going to allow the two halves of the silicone to get back together perfectly without leaving a seam line on our future castings. Now that the mold is cut open, we can go ahead and retrieve our original model out of there, so we can simply squeeze those ball bearings out. And here you can see a perfect example why it's beneficial to go with a softer silicone like the 18 durometer of this SORTA-Clear. It makes it a lot easier to demold the original model and also our future castings out of this mold. And here, one more look. Once we cut that mold open, we're easily able to pull that mold apart and retrieve any castings out of that. Now remember, I mentioned that it's important to be accurate in your gang mold layout. And here you're going to see the perfect example. We need to make a jig to hold the actual lollipop sticks in place. And for that, I'm simply going to use a piece of plexiglass, and we're going to mark where we need to cut that plexiglass in order to create a channel that's going to hold the actual pop stick, so to say. And here I'm going to simply cut a channel into that. Make sure that it's not too big so that the stick falls through. You want to test it before you're ready to go. And once that is set up, we're actually ready to get some attention to that mold. Before we're ready to cast into our food grade mold, we actually have to wash it. Again, if you take a look at the technical bulletin for the product, it does call for washing the mold with soap and water to make sure that it is food grade and food safe for consumption. So I'm going to here just use a sponge, some dish soap, and warm water. I'm going to scrub that thoroughly before actually casting into the mold. Now we can simply set up our jig, put the little popsicles in place, and I decided to do something special here with this mold. Because it's easy to pry open, I decided to put some edible gold to make my first lollipops I ever made very special. These are going to pop and shine really nicely. And once that is set up, we can go ahead and dispense some isomelt. We're going to melt it in a microwave. You can purchase isomelt like this online or in any baking store. And once it's molten, we can simply pour it into our mold. And here you can see how easy and nice those funnel-shaped cones come in handy when you're actually pouring material into your cavity. Now, once that is filled up with the isomelt, we can put the jig down with the handles and now allow the material to harden so that we can actually retrieve the lollipops out of that mold. All right, now the isomelt has fully hardened. We're going to remove our jig that held those handles in place, and then you can see that I'm simply able to bend and pull on that mold and pop it right from behind to retrieve my castings, in this case the lollipops. So it's really easy to manipulate the castings that seem too large for the opening out of that mold. And here's the final result. Not bad for a first casting of my first lollipops. Using the gang mold we made, I was able to cast several different lollipops in different flavors and colors. Now, if you got inspired by this project and you'd like to make your own edibles, you can do so by visiting any one of our distributors around the world.
So, and there we have it, a simple step-by-step instructional video on how to make a food-grade gang mold using the SORTA-Clear 18. Now, if you have an idea about what we should do next, please let me know down in the comments below. And if you like this video, hit the thumbs up button. Now, to keep up with our latest mold making and casting videos, remember to subscribe.